So I know I'm not the first person to do this. I'm probably the last person to publish a video on my thoughts about the Galaxy S20 lineup, but I just need to take my time. I need to put my thoughts together. So here it is, my thoughts on the S20 lineup. So this year we have 3 new models. So we have the S20, that's the base, the entry level, the S20 Plus, a step above that, and then a new one called S20 Ultra. Last year we had a lower than S10 model, that was the S10e, but this year we don't have a lower end model, we have a higher one. So 3 models, S20, S20 Plus, and S20 Ultra. So the thing that I am surprised by the most has to be the price. While we did know that it was going to be $999 a few days before the event, I'm still shocked by the $1,000 entry point. Last year the S10 started at $900, $899. This year it's $1,000. And I didn't see that happening. In fact, the Galaxy S line actually started at $750 last year with the Galaxy S10e, but this year we don't have any E model or a lower entry model. There is no entry model. It's the flagship starts at $1,000. So the cheapest way you can get into a Samsung flagship now, be the S series or Note series, is buying the Note 10 for $950. There is no more $800, $700 option. You got to get right up to that 1,000 level mark if you want to be in the Samsung flagship. So as I said, the cheapest one you can buy is $1,000, but the range goes all the way up to $1,600. That's without tax. So with tax, that's close to $1,750. So $1,750 on a Samsung flagship phone. That sounds, that's a lot. Let me tell you that. That's definitely a lot. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. Let's talk about the phones themselves, and these phones are huge. Seriously, they're huge. They have massive displays. So the S20 has a 6.2 inch display, the S20 Plus has a 6.7 inch display, and the S20 Ultra has a 6.9 inch display. Now all of these are the same resolution. They're 3200 into 1440p. So the display resolution is, as I said, the same across all 3 devices, and all 3 devices do have 120 hertz refresh on them. However, that 120 hertz is going to be limited to the 1080p resolution setting. So if you go up to the highest resolution setting in the display, you're not going to be able to use 120 hertz refresh. It's going to be stuck at 60 hertz. Now, not a big deal if you've never really used it. Not a big deal. But the thing is that most other manufacturers at least have 90 hertz options at 1440p, but Samsung doesn't give you anything. So you either get 120 or 60. There's no middle ground here. You have to stick to one of those two, and you can't get the 120 if you're in the highest display settings. Another thing I'm very happy about and very excited for is the fact that the screen curves. So you must know at this point that the Galaxy phones have pretty curved screens, especially at the corners on the edges. It's okay, but I'm really not a fan of curved displays, and I think I am so happy to report that finally there is a much less prominent curve, and we're almost getting back to the the plane of flat displays. I'm very happy about that. Still definitely curved, but it's definitely way better than the S10. Biggest upgrade has to be the camera. So all 3 models have a different camera setup, and just to make sure I don't get any of them wrong, I'm going to read them out from what I have written down. So try to stay on board. I will put these up on screen as well. The S20, the entry-level $1,000 phone, has a 12 megapixel ultra wide, a 12 megapixel wide, and a 64 megapixel telephoto lens. And that has an optical hybrid zoom that allows you to do 3x optical and 30x digital zoom. Now, 3 cameras, pretty standard deal. Then moving on, we have the S20 Plus, the 6.7 inch $1,200 phone. It shares the first 3 cameras with the S20, so the ultra wide, the wide, and the telephoto, same lens. The S20 Plus adds on a depth sensor, which they call the depth vision camera. This is for depth sensing. This is for understanding your distance and vision. This is going to be used mostly for portrait photos and AR. However, I really don't think most people will get a lot of use out of this sensor. This also has the same zoom capabilities, 3x optical and 30x digital zoom. Moving on, but the most impressive one definitely is the S20 Ultra. Now this has 5 cameras. Now you can only use 3 focal lens, but it has 5 cameras. They are different, they're not the same. So there is a 12 megapixel ultra wide, that's actually the same, but there's a 108 megapixel wide angle. So the the S20 and S20 Plus have a 12 megapixel shooter. This has 108, and it has a 48 megapixel telephoto. So this is actually lower compared to the other phones, but again, I don't understand the concept going on here. But what this sensor, this huge sensor, gives us is a 10x optical hybrid zoom and a 100x zoom digitally. Now, obviously not going to be great quality, but the thing is that it's there. The option is there. So with all that camera hardware, there are plenty of software features as well. The biggest one has to be that zoom. You can go 100x zoom digitally speaking on the S20 Ultra. Another one of these features is they have improved super steady, that's what they call their optical image stabilization, the video stabilization. They've improved it. Super steady looks pretty similar to me compared to the previous generations. It's does a good job of stabilizing video. They say it's improved, but I think it looks pretty similar. A huge new mode is the 8K recording option. So since this has such a big sensor, the 108 megapixel sensor and the 64 on the other phones, you can now take 8K video. Now 8K video, it's a little bit of an overkill. I'm sure there's going to be limitations that we'll see, but the thing is, it's there, so if you want to use it, you can, but I really don't think that's going to be used very often. So there is one more cool software trick in there. It's called single take mode. Now what this does is you hold down the shutter button in this mode and you record whatever's going on, and it will take photos, videos in a bunch of different modes, and it'll add a bunch of effects, special things, and what it'll do is it'll give you a list of all of them at the end. So what it'll do is say it's just a simple movement of two people talking or someone blowing a balloon, whatever, something like that. And instead of just taking a snap photo or a full video, it'll take both, and it'll just take a bunch of options, apply a bunch of filters, stuff like that, to give you a lot more options. So this is more just for entertainment. I really don't think most people should be using this if you want to capture proper photos, but it's just if you want to capture the moment in a bunch of different ways, that's an option for you. So let's wrap up the cameras and talk about that front camera finally. It's a 10 megapixel sensor on the S20 and S20 Plus. It's a 40 megapixel sensor on the S20 Ultra. So camera overkill on the S20 Ultra. All three of them have the same field of vision, 80 degrees. So I'm kind of excited to see what the differences are between the two, especially quality-wise. And finally, a very positive thing, they finally moved the camera hole, the camera punch, in the center. The S10 and S10 Plus had it to the right. I have no idea why they did that. For me, I really think it was just that since they were adding the notch, or they were adding an intrusion in the screen, they didn't want to put it in the center like Apple, because they made a lot of fun of Apple doing that with the iPhone 10, the notch. So I'm thinking maybe that was the reason they put it to the right, just to be a little bit unique. But they've realized it's not that brilliant and moved it to the center, and I'm perfectly fine with that. It looks a lot better than it was on the right. Now, one of my favorite spec bumps has to be the battery. So the battery has gone up significantly. So let me just say the battery for this and compare it to last year. So S20, the base S20 has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. The S10, last year's comparable version, had a 3,400 milliamp hour battery. Same way, the S20 Plus has a 4,500 milliamp hour battery compared to the 4,100 milliamp hour on the S10 Plus. And the S20 Plus, the S20 Ultra, since there's no direct competitor, I'm just going to take the the S10 5G. That was a massive phone. It had a battery bump, so that had a 4,500 milliamp hour battery, but the S20 Ultra has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. Wow, I am mixing up megapixels and milliamp hours. I'm so sorry, guys. But it's insane. What a huge jump, and I'm very happy Samsung is going into the big batteries again. Finally getting that big battery that these phones deserve. The flagships definitely need better batteries, and I love that Samsung has finally given that to us. So moving on, let me talk about the design. It's a great design. It looks very clean. Very Samsung-esque, curved glass front and back. Very clean design. The one notable thing here is that we no longer have a headphone jack, but on the bright side, we don't have a dedicated Bixby button anymore either, so that's very good. Unfortunately, no wireless headphones either. I really don't care. I have my own pair, but I can see this as a potential, a reason why some people might not like this. Samsung has always had the headphone jack. Now they've removed it. It's something I know that some people still do care about, so I thought I'd mention it. So that wraps up the technical aspect of all these, the specs, the everything. Now I want to talk about the phone and what I thought about it. And I think the first thing I have to say is that this entire lineup is a convoluted mess. There are so many options, so many variants. Everything is messed up. There is no consistency from one country to another in this phone. So if you're in one country, you're going to get a completely different set of options from another country. And I've been going crazy trying to figure out if there's anything that makes sense about it. I've looked at the Emirates website, the UAE. I've looked at India. I've looked at US. I've looked at UK. And every single one of these has different options, different varieties. There's just too many variants of this phone. You know, there's differences in the processor. There's differences with RAM. There's differences with the just the color options. Everything with this phone is confusing, and I think that it's gonna be tough to explain to anyone which one they should get. You know, for example, the US, you have only 5G options, so you cannot get a 4G S20 in the US. So for me, I really don't want to use 5G. I'm pretty sure that I don't pay for it. If I have to pay extra. I'd rather just stick to 4G as it is, definitely at least for the upcoming year or so, until 5G becomes more reliable and a lot less expensive. This is annoying because mainly this phone isn't 5G only everywhere. A lot of places you have the option of buying the 4G or the 5G version. In some countries it's only the 4G version, and as I'm saying, you just keep thinking about this more and more, it's a big mess. It just doesn't make sense. And not to mention now, if you're buying a 4G version, there's going to be different specs, there's going to be a different processor, there's two versions, that's always been there, but now the Exynos is going to have only 8 gigs of RAM, the Snapdragon is the one that has 12 gigs and 16 gigs of RAM, and you know, there's so many different variants. So you can buy the same phone, but have everything internally be different about it. So let me just throw up a screenshot of the RAM page. So this is just the differences in RAM, and look at how messed up this is. This is so confusing, and this is for 3 models, okay? This is pretty much as confusing as it can be. I don't know how they could make this even more complicated. Everything that could be different is different with these phones based on your region. And you know, the thing that I'm concerned about here is that Samsung has a history of not having the larger profit margins that Apple enjoys. So Apple has larger profit margins, they have lower model options, which means cost is lower for them to develop, to manufacture, to everything. When you look at it that way, it's simpler for Apple. Samsung, on the other hand, has 2 chip options, so they can have the Exynos or Snapdragon. They have 4 different color options. They have 3 different model options. They have 3 different storage options. Again, storage as well, I forgot to mention. A lot of countries don't have 256 GB options. A lot of countries do have 256 GB options. So there is so much complication and variation. It's not standard. So when you look at something like the iPhone, you have the same 6 colors throughout the world. You have the same 3 storage options throughout the world. That's what you're going to get. Same processor, same RAM. Just because you're in a different country, you're not going to get a different phone. So all in all, there's a lot going on with these 3 phones. And to kind of bring things to a little bit of a wrap here, I want to talk about the thing that I took away from this entire event, and that is that Samsung has a big focus on hardware, but they don't have as big of a focus on software. They are just not focusing on that as much as they should be, in my opinion. They barely talk about it. The one thing, again, I noticed with camera was they show off their camera, all they do is say it's AI powered, AI this, AI that. And at one point, I texted my friend this, and I was like, if they say AI one more time, I will lose my shit. I was like, ban the word AI in any more tech launches. It's so frustrating because it's such a blanket term and doesn't give you specifics. What are they doing? You know, Apple and Google have excellent computational photography. They take multiple photos, stitch them together, do great stuff on the software side. So even if, say, they have mediocre cameras or not as intense, you know, as of a complicated of a setup as Samsung does, they produce photos somehow that are better. Now, we have seen this for multiple years on end. Now, S20, I haven't seen samples, I haven't taken myself, so I don't know if this is still the case, but I'm willing to bet it's probably going to be just a step behind the Google Pixel and the iPhone. They focus way too much on hardware, in my opinion. They should be bringing focus to software as well. There needs to be a marriage of these two. As we've seen in the last couple of years, Hardware is okay, but software is the most important thing. And Samsung needs to understand this. They need to implement this. And, you know, $1,000 phones, you know, not everybody can sell them. Even Apple struggled with selling $1,000 phones. So Samsung, you have a big task ahead of you if you want people to buy $1,400 phones from you and survive, just, you know, keep going on. So I know I have sounded quite cynical in a lot of parts of this video, but let me tell you guys, I am actually excited for this phone. I am hoping it succeeds. I'm not rooting against it. I love Samsung phones. They do great stuff. The hardware is excellent, and I am really excited to see how this phone goes. I'm honest. I'll be honest with you. I'm not happy about the price. I wish it was lower, but it is what it is. I am very excited about the display. It's going to be less curved. It has a 120 Hz refresh rate. It's going to be nice to see something like that from Samsung. So the battery as well is going to be a big improvement here. The S10 was pretty good for me. Actually, it was way better than I expected it to be. So I'm sure the S20 is just going to be excellent. So I'm just very excited to get this phone in my hand, see what it's like. If you guys have any questions, opinions, I'm sure a lot of people are going to try to defend Samsung here and there. If you do want to defend Samsung, please, I go ahead, encourage you to do so. Please try to be reasonable. Just don't argue for the sake of arguing. If you have a good conversational starter or a point, I'd love to engage with you guys in a great conversation. Comment section is right down below. If you haven't already, guys, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and follow me on social media. All the links right over here. And that's going to be it for this one, guys. As I said, if any have questions or conversations, let's get them started down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.